do mock interviews. But more importantly, you will eventually try to get real jobs. Some of you have probably already tried to get real jobs. So it's probably worth talking a little bit about what that process is like, how hiring managers sometimes make their decisions, etc. So who's had I heard some of you talking about it, so I know the answer is already some of you. Who's had an interview where they were asked a question that they just had no idea what to do with? Yeah, what was that, Walker?
It was actually the first time I ever got the describe yourself. And I kept giving them answers.
Describe yourself, yeah. Oh, blonde? Oh. Yeah, Todd?
We were asked, at least for me personally, on the phone interview, for this place, for extern boot camp, they're pick 3 words to describe yourself.
3 words to describe yourself. Did pretty much everybody get that question?
I thought that was too advanced for
lazy, shiftless, unscrupulous. Yeah, basically. Yeah.
In one interview that I had, because I'm still trying to find an internship or positions, they ask about projects that you work on.
Yeah.
Even if I have projects that I've worked on, I'm not really sure what they want to hear.
Okay, that's a really good one.
Yeah, I mean, do they want to hear how I pre-code and my methodology, or do they want to hear about the technology?
That's a really good one. Let's come back to that in just a second. Anyone feel like they had a really good answer for describe yourself? Anyone have any idea what they're looking for when they even ask something like that? What's that? It's more fun. It's more fun if it's a discussion. Seth, you ever gotten that question?
Yeah, I mean, I think...
Have you ever asked that question? Because we both hired people, too.
Not that exact question, but I think the important thing is to have some kind of understanding of why you do the things that you do before you go into one. And honestly, that really comes from thinking about what things do you like to do. Okay, why do I like to do them? And just keep asking yourself why to each successive thing until you really get to the bottom of it. Because once you understand yourself really well and what motivates you and what things you like to do and find satisfaction from, then that question becomes a lot easier to answer. That's really what it is. And the thing I think people make a mistake about a lot in interviewing is people want to, it's a short amount of time that they're talking to you, right? And so it's not like you're going to come out of there with them having a good idea of a long work history or a long relationship with you. What they want to know is is this the type of person that I think that are going to fit in here well, and I kind of have a good idea of the kind of work they like to do, and that aligns with what we're trying to do. And so having a good understanding of why you do things and being able to articulate that really helps them, because the more they feel like they understand you, they actually start making a story in their head about how you're going to fit in with their organization, and so then the conversation just gets a lot easier after that.
Yeah, so kind of all the questions they ask are about that, about trying to figure out, what kind of worker you're going to be. So anyway, keep those things in mind, and yeah, it does take some reflection. And to be a good worker, not just a good interview, you kind of do need to get to know yourself, which can take a really long time. And frankly, many of you may not be finished becoming who you think you are, even if you think you have, because I know neither of us had really figured out what we were all about when we were. Well, gosh, you guys just finished your freshman year, most of you. Yeah, when I was 19, I was totally wrong about what kind of grown up I was going to turn out to be, and in most cases, that's good news, because present company excluded, 19-year-olds can be some of the worst people on earth. Oh, by 20, you'll have it all figured out. Yes, right. Flawless. All the selfishness gone. So yeah, the question that Jay referred to, tell me about a project that you've worked on. That's a pretty good question, because it's a way to get them talking about work, even if it's schoolwork, and it also gives the person being interviewed a chance to pick what they want to talk about. So, it's a project of your choice. Describe that thing. And yeah, they're kind of looking probably for your approach, to see, maybe you get really excited talking about it and talking about all the features you did. Maybe you have an opportunity to kind of demonstrate, the stuff we talked about the first day, or it wasn't the first day, but the scale of awesomeness. Like, you make things work, you make them work well, you make them maintainable. And that can be an opportunity to talk about that stuff, especially if it was a team project. Then you have an opportunity to kind of demonstrate how you work with others, because that's going to be a very big thing when applying for jobs. Even if it's like remote work, you're still probably going to be on a team. You're going to have to get along with other people. You're going to be contributing to a code base that other people are also contributing to. So if you've done that kind of thing before and you have a chance to sort of talk about how that worked, that's a good chance to do that. So it's good to pick a project that you actually are interested in, because it's just easier to talk about. Todd, what were you going to say?
So team-based, solo better than nothing, right?
Oh, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I'm just saying that's one of the things that you could talk about if you're talking about a project, is how you worked with the team. But yeah, solo work is still.
And I wouldn't even say that teamwork is superior to solo. It's
Yeah,
different.
yeah. It's just one of the things that you could.
I guess, right? So, but also, do they want to see, I know, one of the questions I think is usually, tell me about, a problem you've had, in a project, or,
Yeah, right.
sometimes it's just
Yeah.
in general, a problem in just everyday life or something.
Yep.
They want to see how you problem solve, right?
Yes, yeah, that's another really common one. There's tell me about a project you worked on, and there's tell me about a problem you've encountered, and what you did about it. What's that? Well, that depends on the problem, because sometimes there's some real crisis management involved. So coming back to that in just a second, as far as the project stuff goes, one thing they're trying to figure out is, can you get stuff done? I remember Joel on Software, that's a blog written by a guy who used to work for Microsoft, who now runs Fog Bugs. They make Bugzilla and Stack Overflow, actually, right? He when he talks about hiring, he says he's always looking for two things: smart and gets things done. And he kind of doesn't care beyond that. I care about a few more things than that personally. But that's one thing that people try to figure out. Do you see things through? Do you finish your work? That kind of stuff. As far as the problem, tell me about a problem you've encountered. Yeah, they're trying to see how you deal with problems when they do occur, because they will occur. Nobody's perfect. You are going to make mistakes at your job. And if you've had any job experience at all, you've probably already done that thing. And it can be helpful to see how you handled it. Did you just panic and freak out and wait for someone else to come bail you out? Hopefully not. And if you did, think of another problem where you didn't do that and tell them about that one. Right. I learned from that experience where I freaked out, and then the next time I encountered a problem, I knew just what to do. I don't know if you've had this experience in life yet, but sometimes if you have an experience with a company or a person and they screw up, if they handle the screw up well enough, it can almost leave you more impressed than if they hadn't screwed up in the first place. So handling a crisis really well can be a really good thing, and you do inevitably learn from that, and it can help you manage future problems, because if there is some part of dealing with it that you kind of mess up and people get mad at you and stuff, learn from that, evaluate that, do a post-mortem after the problem's over and see how could we have handled this better, and kind of have a plan. One time, many years ago, more than 10 years, I did just about the worst thing that a developer can do. I deleted the production database in an app. Yeah, that's a bad one. Don't do that thing. No. I'm not. Many people have done that. There was one on there very recently, and it was someone who had just been hired. Right? They were a new hire, junior developer, and they blew away the database. like one of their first days on the job. And what a lot of the replies to that were saying was, well, that's that company's fault for making it possible for a brand new developer to even delete the database if they wanted to, much less to easily do it accidentally. And that was frankly probably true of the environment in which I was working. The developer should not have had that kind of access to the production database server. You know, when you deploy stuff, you should have scripts that do all that stuff automatically. You shouldn't be logging directly into the production database server. You know, only a DBA should do that, and only rarely for things like backups and stuff. But yeah, I should have read-only access to that probably, because what I was trying to do was make a copy of the production database server and make a copy of the production database, copy it to my development database, so I had more up-to-date data to work with, and I did it the other way around. I just had them in the wrong order, and everything was gone because I was logged in as a user who could blow all that away. Now, and I told somebody about this in a job interview later, and when they were like, tell me about a mistake you've made at work, and holy crap, their eyes got wide as soon as I said that. Then I told them, so, you know, here's what we did to fix it. And, you know, thankfully we had transaction logs up to the minute, so we didn't lose any data. And in the meantime, you know, everyone was able to keep working. And this was not a customer-facing app. This was an internal use app. And we still had a way to get everything back pretty quickly. Crisis averted. It took a couple hours. In the meantime, people had to do some stuff on paper that they usually do in a system. It was not the end of the world. And I sure as heck never did it again. And like it taught us that, like, because we were not a software company. It was I was actually the only programmer there, and so we did not have good change management controls in place. And that kind of, you know, taught us the hard way that those things were really important, even if it's a tiny shop and there's only one developer. It's still really easy to screw something up that can have an effect on everyone who uses the thing. Fortunately, we did have at least know what we were doing in terms of taking database backups. So, you know, we could not only restore to like last night's backup, but we could use transaction logs to take it basically up to the minute that I screwed everything up. So we got everything back. But yeah, so I was able to explain, you know, how we fixed it, and then how our process changed so that it wouldn't happen again. And the place I was applying was a big enterprise place, like 40,000 employees, 1,000 IT employees, and they of course had a process. But the job was to be an enterprise software manager, to like manage an enterprise software development team. So it was a little scary to them to hear that I had that in my past. I did get the job, incidentally. So it all worked out. But some people you'd see from that Reddit thread too, just like would stop listening when they found out that you ever did that. But that's ridiculous. Everyone makes mistakes, and it should not be possible for a junior dev to have that kind of access. And the important thing is that you handle it appropriately.
Did you like get up and like tell like your boss or something like immediately?
Yeah. Yeah. At first I was like, wait, did I really just do that? And I was like, oh crap. And yeah, my boss was actually
You go to the bathroom first.
right. I made another cup of coffee. Watched a little Netflix, and then right. I was like, I just binge watched the Orange is the New Black, and, but which didn't exist at the time. But anyway, at that point, I actually, so this was a company of about 50, and like I said, I was the only developer. Most people were like network engineers and stuff like that, or people who worked in the call center and were like tier 1 network support folks. And for lack of anyone better to report to, I actually reported to the president of the company. So, you know, good news is he's a decent human being. He is also enormous. Like his hands he could easily palm my head. In meetings, you know, he always had two chairs in meetings. The one he sat in, and then the one he pulled up to use as an armrest. So it was a little intimidating just because he was so much bigger a human being than I was. But super nice guy. So I immediately told him, and I told the guy who was over all the network engineers, like, look, this happened. Here's what we're going to do about it. I'm going to talk to, you know, the database guy real quick, and we're going to get started restoring this. In the meantime, here is what people should do instead, since they can't use the thing. So that they, you know, here's what the procedure should be. So we kind of wrote up instructions for everyone to follow to basically do what they would do using the app manually. And yeah.
I had another question about that's related to asking for help. So
Okay.
if I don't know if it's really something we'll bring up in an interview, but you know, I'm someone who likes to ask questions if I don't know how to do something.
Mm-hmm.
Is that the same case when you're in a position at a company? I mean, do you have resources that you can, like, do you have team members that you can refer to, or do you just have to kind of use your own resources?
I will say the truth is that depends a great deal on the company, and you want to work someplace where it's not impossible to ask for help, but you also want to find the right balance. Like in his first presentation on the very first day, that was about a boot camp, but it's true in a job too. Like, spend a little time trying to figure it out yourself before you ask for help, and then try to ask for help in a way that doesn't completely interrupt someone. You know, use Slack or whatever to do that. And it is a tricky thing to kind of develop a team where that doesn't just throw everybody off. Sometimes you might have to save it for a break or whatever. Like in our case, you know, there's only 4 developers at Fretless, but we have Flowdoc, which is like Slack but better. Flowdoc, and like if one of us runs into something, we'll often just like paste that into the team flow, just like a Slack channel, and you know, someone will look at it when they have time. And in the meantime, you know, we'll try to move on to something else so we don't just sit there stuck. But a lot of times the kind of questions we ask are things like, you know, I did this way, but it feels like there ought to be a better way. There's a better way to write this code, right? This can be refactored. That kind of stuff at this point more than, you know, how do I get past this error? But sometimes it's that thing too. You've probably been in this position more times more recently than I have. I'm still in this position sometimes. But yeah, what do you want? What can you say about that?
I can just tell you, like, as a boss, I would want to know that people on my team, at least, put a good effort into figuring things out on their own and like utilizing the resources that are available to them first. So yeah, the guideline from the first presentation about the boot camp, that's pretty good guideline for life, to be honest. So, you know, like whatever knowledge base articles or documentation is available to you related to that problem, did you look into that first? Did you Google it? That seems really obvious, but you'd be surprised. And like, did you give at least a decent amount of time, you know, somewhere between 15-30 minutes trying to figure it out? But also, we gotta get stuff done, so I want to make sure that you don't just like stay stuck for forever on something that somebody else on the team could easily answer. Like, there's a resource available to you, and you've done the work to try and figure it out on your own, you're just stuck on something. I'm like, are you going to ask for help? Are you comfortable asking for help when you need it? But do you really need it, right?
And by the way, reading code is another really good way to find solutions, like you said on Code Wars, but also in whatever project you're on at your job. And this is one of the reasons why good commit messages and small atomic commits are important, because you can look through the history and see where someone solved problem X, and you can see how they did that. So you can kind of get a feel for, you know, how they approached a similar problem if you can look back at their commits and find when they did that thing. So that's really useful too. And this is why in class, a lot of times you see us, you know, sometimes we do legit troubleshooting in here because we just plain make a mistake. But we also make a lot of mistakes on purpose just so you see certain error messages and get used to how to deal with them and learn how to use the dev tools. We talk about the dev tools a whole heck of a lot. And it's not just because we think it's fun to frustrate you. It's because one of the most important things you can learn is how to get unstuck. So like, in class, we pull up the documentation or whatever and find the part that tells us how this function works. Because we don't just have all the APIs memorized. And it's important to know that you don't have to. And we'll talk more about that in a few minutes, but yeah, how to troubleshoot is really important, and how to ask a good question too. Because if you have spent some time figuring it out, and you go to someone, don't just say, this is broken, or give them the super vague thing. Well, it's just not doing it, and I did it right. Well, no, you probably didn't do something right. Tell them what you've already tried, all that kind of stuff, and get used to using developer tools and basically all the tools that are at your disposal to figure things out. But yeah, don't spend forever so that you can't get anything done. So, for example, and you guys are brand new to this, so please don't take this as like a huge personal criticism if you did this thing. But like, if you ask for help, come over and you have never even opened up the console in the browser to see if there is an error message, like that error message may tell you pretty much exactly what you need to change. So look at the error message before you ask for help. If it seems like, this is all real specific to React, but it applies to whatever. If it seems like one of your props isn't working, use the developer tools to figure out if that prop's value is even what you think it is, or if that prop showed up at all. And maybe you'll find out that you mistyped something, you misspelled something because it didn't get passed in right, or whatever, or an argument to a function. Use a console log or a breakpoint or whatever to try to figure those things out. Yeah, sometimes you just won't know, that some function exists that could solve your problem. So, again, exactly what the culture is like at any given company for how you ask for help. It is important to be able to ask people for help. And sometimes, it's people who don't even work there. Like, you shouldn't be telling them proprietary information about that place. But, if you're like, I can't sort this array right. Well, sorting an array is something everyone does. So sometimes you can ask for help on Stack Overflow, for example, or with just other developer friends. And that is one of the reasons why we talk so much about meetups. It's really great to meet other developers and to hang out with them and to build relationships. Because sometimes you just get together and you talk about code and talk about problems you've encountered recently and how you fixed it and stuff like that. Seth went to boot camp with a guy that he talks to all the time. They get together on weekends and stuff and just do some pair programming on side projects just because it keeps them sharp. And we'll talk about that kind of stuff again more later too. But yeah, that's a really good question about asking for help.
I don't think I would ever, and I would say this is true, I don't think I'd ever be mad at somebody coming to me with a question where it was like, they could clearly articulate what they were trying to do in a few ways they have tried to solve it.
Yeah.
And, because then I at least know enough about the problem that I'm going to be able to help them, and they have kind of knocked out some of the easy stuff, so we can actually work towards a solution. And I know they're not just this is broke, fix it, right?
Yeah, and again, don't feel bad about asking for help in this class because you're doing this in the way that you ask for help because you're doing this for the first time, and you don't know how to ask those questions yet. But hopefully, over the course of the class, we've demonstrated that stuff enough times that maybe you have a better idea of how to ask a good question. What were you just talking about? Oh yeah, you won't get mad. Sometimes there's a better time than others to ask. Like if you can see that someone's really concentrating hard, maybe wait. But yeah. Yes, Elaine? Yeah, the headphone rule. Don't interrupt people who are wearing headphones. That's what that means.
Some offices have that rule.
Yeah. That's your clue that they can't be interrupted. Yeah. You have no cubicles or anything, no dividers at all, right? Yeah. Yeah, and that can create a kind of a bad environment where nobody feels like they're allowed to talk to anybody else. So I'm not necessarily a huge fan of the headphone rule because it leads to everyone just doing it all the time. But it can be like, if you're really deep into concentration on something, it can be a helpful signal. Yeah, Celine. Uh-huh. Mm-hmm. So as far as researching the person who's going to interview you, if you know that ahead of time, part of that is researching the company and knowing as much as you can about the job. But also, yeah, like at times, I can think of a specific example for me. It was that same job that I told you about applying for earlier. I knew I was going to be interviewed by like these 4 people, and they were all like, there was the director of enterprise software, and then there were like 3 other enterprise software managers who were going to be my peers. And I found out what they did, and I found out which projects they manage. If I could find that out, so then I could just ask better questions. Like I'd be like, okay, so you're over the like the online learning piece, right? They're like, yeah. They're like, and is that open source or community source? What's community source? And that kind of stuff, and just find out more about those projects, which can lead you to being able to ask questions like, one of the things you should be trying to find out in an interview is what it's like to work there. To find out whether you whether you even want to, and sometimes, and if you have some idea what these people do for a living, you can ask them, more specific questions that might help you get to that. And this kind of leads to the another point, which is the one you usually talk about when you apply for something before you even have an interview. If you can contact someone directly, that's a lot better than just filling out an online application, because the barrier to entry for an online application is so low. So many people do it. And you have to find some way to stand out from the 500 other resumes that they get. So if you can find someone who actually has something to do with that job and get in touch with them, tell them you're applying, tell them about yourself, and maybe even ask a question or two, that helps.
You're saying connect to like anybody associated with the position, or like the person who you would assume to be in charge?
If you can find the person that you would assume is like the person who's going to be making the hiring decision, that's great.
As a general rule, any real actual person
Yeah.
that you can get in contact with is going to be better than just submitting through an online portal.
Yeah. They can still mention it to someone, just someone who works in that department or whatever, or even just like truly anyone. Like find somebody on LinkedIn and say, what's it like to work there or whatever. I was thinking of applying for this thing. All of that stuff is better than just being another person who submitted a thing, because they may then go talk to the person who is going to be interviewing you.
This is again going back to the whole community aspect of it, the meetups, things like that. It's not like you're going to meetups purely just to network and try to get a job, but that's certainly, if you have those relationships built ahead of time, it certainly makes it so much easier to find a job.
Yeah.
Even if, like at the meetup last night, there were probably at least 10 or 15 companies represented. Some were directly hiring, some at least knew other people that were hiring. So, if you go on LinkedIn, it's even nice enough to be like, you have a, like first relationship with this person, second relationship with that. So you know them through somebody you already know. But yeah, even if you don't have a direct relationship with them, being like, hey, I saw so-and-so, we were talking the other day about this, and, you mentioned your company, and I thought that would be, just something like that. Anything where you can talk to an actual person is going to be better than just like a generic online portal.
And besides just giving them another way that they've heard of you, it also does demonstrate that like you want this particular job. You're not just blindly applying to everything under the sun. You bothered to find out a little something about this place.
Oh yeah, one other point I wanted to make, like your question about finding out about people. Level. It's obvious, but I've been on the interviewing side of the table, and yeah, like, oh, I saw you did this last weekend because I saw you stalked you. Not stalked you on Facebook, but you're like, you should not know that. if you do know that, you shouldn't bring it up in an interview.
So how was the show last night? Man, your seats were pretty good, huh? I really liked that polo shirt. Boy, all that work you've been doing at the gym at 116th and it's really been paying off.
Dude, nice.
And of course, they always ask you, like, do you have any questions for me, right? And it's always good to have a question, not just to impress the interviewer, but because, hopefully you do want to know a little more about this thing. And there's one you always bring up that you like to ask.
Just a little more on that part. Never go into an interview without some kind of question. Hopefully, if an interview is going well, you'll just have questions.
Naturally, right.
Because most of the time, if an interview is going well, it ends up being more of a conversation, and so you just kind of naturally have some questions. But even if not, the worst thing you can do is at the end when they're like, "Well, do you have any questions for us?" You're like, "No, I'm good." And you'd be surprised how often that happens in an interview. So just go in with at least one or two that you have thought about ahead of time. So that's where research about the company ahead of time can come in handy. So again, not getting into anything super specific, but if you have a general question about the company, their goals or things like that, that's a good one. One that I pretty much always do some sort of variation of, if it's not already come up, is just something related to how that team judges success. So one I would do is say I were to get hired tomorrow, in 90 days from now, what would make you look back and say, okay, that was a good hire? What characteristics of what I would do over the next 90 days would make you feel like I was a good hire? So that's a really good one. Another one, variation of that, is what are some characteristics of the most successful people on your team? Because really what you're trying to get at is what do they value as an organization, and specifically on the team you're wanting to work on. Because if they think somebody is particularly successful on their team, they're going to have some characteristics that align with what their goals are. So that's a good way to figure out a lot about the organization and whether you want to work there or not.
And whether they have any idea how they measure success too.
Yeah.
Because sometimes they're like, well, gosh, I don't know. You've gotten some work done. You have independently shipped 10 new features in your first month. Well, then maybe they're a little unreasonable, that sort of thing. So, yeah, good stuff. Any other questions about that? I think some of these things will also kind of come up naturally in the rest of the morning. But, anything else specifically about interviewing? Yeah.
Obviously, you're interviewing because you need a job, you need money, or whatever. So when does the topic of money come in? Obviously, it's not like the first thing. There's multiple interviews, sometimes for the same job.
Mm-hmm.
There's a chain that you have to get through. But sometimes they're just one-offs if they're contract work. So, for which situations, when do you talk about actual money?
Just get the job. Accept the paycheck.
You wait 3 weeks after you started and see what that first paycheck is.
Yeah. Well, it's good. It's good to at least have a vague idea by the end of the first conversation, so that both parties know whether it's even worth talking again. Because if somebody's expectations are wildly different than the others, then maybe you shouldn't waste your time and theirs. But it's always tricky and sensitive. I wish more places would just kind of give you an idea of a salary range. They always ask you first, yes. And for what it's worth, there's absolutely no benefit to you in doing that. So they'll want to know what you make at your current job. And, if you can avoid saying that, here's the thing. Most places want to pay you as little as they possibly can to get you hired. As little as you will take. Which if you just have no idea what the market is even like, that's it can kind of feel like they're basically trying to screw you over a little bit. which is unfortunate. Now that job I was telling you about that I applied for and got, it happened to be something related to state government. So everyone's salary was actually posted online. So I knew exactly what they paid people in this sort of position. I knew like who the lowest paid enterprise software manager was and who the highest paid enterprise software manager was. So I knew a range. So it kept me from going in there and like saying $15,000 less than the lowest paid person. Not that they would hire me at that rate anyway, because again, since they know everything's public, they know they have to be pretty fair. And I actually kind of like that for that reason. It kept them from really screwing somebody over.
Any advice for
When you are asked that question. Yeah, so Seth honestly has probably done this more than I have, or especially lately. Yeah.
So especially when I was transitioning into programming as a field, so I haven't used this too many times, but the times I have used it was very successful. So I'll just put that disclaimer out there, but it worked really well. When they would ask, like, you know, what your salary is or what you would want to get paid, I would just say some variation of, you know, I don't think at this point in the interview process I'm comfortable sharing that information. Maybe you could just give me a range of what you typically pay for this, and then we can decide if this is worth continuing the interview process. No. I mean, I think a lot of it's in how you present it, but, you know, and
If you're like, screw you, I'm not telling you.
right. Because honestly, I mean, they're kind of used to people being uncomfortable when being asked that question, so just being upfront about it, be like, yeah, hey, I'm not real comfortable sharing that at this point. But you know, if you wouldn't mind sharing like what sort of range you would typically pay for this kind of role, and a lot of times that's information you can get. But
What if they say they're not feel comfortable?
that's fine. You just
I don't feel
go on from
comfortable.
there. But that's worked, and sometimes the amount they say for the range is higher than I would have asked for in the first place, and you're like, all right, well now I know kind of what I can ask for when we get to that point.
Right.
But yeah, Davey's right. Like, and it's not any nefarious thing. It's just like that's the way business works. If they know they can get you for cheap, essentially, like they're not going to offer way more than that for no reason, right? So, yeah, I just typically don't share that and say something like that.
At Fretless, we do try to be really fair. We don't want to screw people over. So, you know, a lot of time, well, actually, every time I can think of, almost, like we give people raises before they ask for it. Because if someone is clearly exceeding the expected performance for someone making what they make, you know, we fix that before they find another job or something, hopefully. But I've worked places where like I literally never would have gotten a job if I hadn't kept interviewing for other jobs and getting other offers. Which was never why I was doing interviews, but that's actually one way to get a raise, is to get a job offer from someone else. If they want to keep you. Now you may find out they don't want to keep you that bad. But that's also a good thing to know. Right. Don't tell them you have a fake offer. They're like, okay, well, it's been great working with you. Best of luck there.
My cousin's boyfriend, when he graduated Ball State, he was making pretty good money, and then he got a job offer. Like this company reached out to him.
Mhm.
It was like, hey, we have this team that we're kind of put together for this company, and we have a spot. We want you to be in the spot. And they're like, we'll offer you like double what you're making here. And then he told his company, and they're like, well, we'll offer you more.
Right.
Well, okay, we're gonna offer you.
Right. Yeah. Sometimes you get into a bidding war. So I've heard. So one time, at this same job that I've been telling you about a year and a half in, I was super unhappy, and I got another job offer, and it was actually for less money, but I would kind of do anything to get out of there under the circumstances, and so I wasn't even like kind of give them a chance. I just I called my boss and said, I'm going to take this other job. And she said, is there anything we could do to keep you? And so, you know, I said, well, I mean, if you paid me this, and I told her what the other offer was. I'm like, it's for like $10,000 less than what you're paying. Actually, it was 15. It was $15,000 less than what they were paying me, but I hated it that much. I was like, if you give me a $10,000 raise and you fix all of these problems with the job, and you can do that by noon tomorrow, and I called her at 8 p.m., I said, okay, then I would stay. And so then, like I said, sometimes you find out how much you're worth to the company. She pulled it off. she actually called. She called the CIO, and again, this was a place with 40,000 employees. She called the CIO, told him the situation, and he was actually in like a board meeting the next day and was seated next to he was in the middle of the board meeting and was sitting next to the CFO of the whole organization. And like, so they were, because you can't get salaries approved in that length of time at a bureaucracy like that. They did. They got the raise approved in that length of time, and she promised to fix these other aspects of the job. So I was like, gosh, okay, I guess I'll stay. So I stayed exactly 1 more year and a half, and then nothing could keep me. But yeah, that improved my attitude for a while. Yeah, Todd.
That shows the power of like keeping your skills sharp in the job, not like
Yep.
hopping, like not quickly. But
Right.
always kind of looking for the next step. I hear like in software, I think like the tech industry, I think everything moves so quickly to like move every couple of years, maybe like when you're young, like something like that, move companies a lot. So, like more finding companies and growing your skill set.
Yeah, I mean, like, if you find a really good job where you get to work on a variety of things and they give you the opportunity to do that growth without changing jobs, that's great too. Because also sometimes if you job hop too much, people won't hire you because they know you're not going to stick around. Or like if they do hire you, they're not going to bother investing in your growth, like training you and all that stuff, because they know you're not going to stick around.
There's like some people make it like an absolute rule, like you shouldn't stay longer than a year to 2 years at a job when you're first starting out. I would change that to not be an absolute and just say you should be prepared to leave within that range and be open to other opportunities at that stage. But doesn't mean you have to if the place you're working for really likes you and wants to keep you and you're also willing to. Because a lot of times you're right, moving is the best way to increase your salary quickly. But if the place you're at, would match it and you really like it, then you don't have to like stick to some arbitrary rule just for that. And I know some people like to present it as more like an absolute suggestion.
And another thing about the situation I was in, oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was gonna say like so like that. I mean that's like kind of like there's not enough opportunity to grow within that company. Then it's probably better to find like a different like job, right? And if there are different opportunities in the business that you move around.
Sure, absolutely.
It's like good for growth and stuff.
And side projects are good too if there's time for them, to keep your skills sharp and to learn other things that maybe aren't the thing you're working on right then. So one of the things about my situation that I was telling you about was, like when I got that job, I was told, again, it was a management job, but I was told it'd be like 50% management, 50% development. It was 0% development, as it turned out, and 5% management, 95% meetings, where no decisions were ever made. So the longer I stayed there, the more I felt like, well, I'm no longer qualified to do anything else. I'll be stuck here forever because my programming skills have atrophied. I work so many hours, I don't have the will to do any side projects. And I am developing I'm not even developing management skills because I'm just in meetings all the time, and they're poorly run meetings. And I'm not allowed to run my meetings the way I think meetings should be run because, well, that's just how it is. Because I had several meetings where I was ostensibly the organizer. And so I would, try to have an agenda, try to stick to that agenda, and force a decision on things where the decision had to be made. And like, that's not how that place worked. And it would, if my boss was in the meeting too, she just like overrule me and just let the thing deteriorate. It was amazing. It was an amazing job. And so I was learning a lot about how to not do certain things, but I didn't feel like I was really developing any management skills either. So that was another reason why I wanted the heck out of there and was willing to take a pay cut, because even if I took a big pay cut but were doing something productive, then I would feel way more prepared to, way more qualified to apply for other jobs that maybe would pay better and that I would enjoy. Because if you're kind of enjoying the work, it's a lot easier to keep your skills sharp too. And that's one of the things about freelancing. Your projects change frequently. You may be using different technology and having lots of new opportunities to explore new ideas because you're almost like job hopping despite the fact that your actual job didn't change. And we're actually going to talk about that in a minute in a little more detail. But that's another thing about that too. Yeah. Anything else about this? Okay. Yeah?
I think I'm good.
Okay.
Yeah.
You're thinking about it.
Well, actually,
Yeah. Somehow I had a feeling you did.
it's not really about interviewing now.
Okay, ask what it is, and if it's better for another time, I'll try to tell you to remember it.
All right. You said you guys work on side projects, or at least Steph does.
Mm-hmm.
What kind of side projects do you guys do nowadays? Are you guys mostly web dev, or do you guys do other things?
Web and mobile, basically. That's pretty much it.
Like mobile, like Android, iOS.
Right.
Do you guys use like actually like Java and Swift? Or do you use like React Native or something?
We have done more of the latter. So using something like React Native or Ionic, which is Angular, things that compiled down, and that is mostly just because of the opportunities we've had. So like I did some Objective-C iOS development back before Swift existed, and then the client work we've gotten since then, we've just never had an opportunity to do that. But we did have an opportunity to build a multi-platform mobile app using Ionic and Angular and Cordova, which compiles JavaScript down to Java for Android and well, I don't know if it's what it spits out. It's Objective-C, I think, yeah, for iOS.
Is that cross-platform Android and iOS, the Ionic framework?
What's that?
Is that cross-platform, the Ionic?
Ionic is, yeah. Ionic can compile to that and even Windows. And so that gave us an opportunity. And like in that case, when we took that job, and yeah, we will get more into this later, like we hadn't done that exact thing. Obviously, we knew JavaScript pretty well, and we knew an earlier version of Angular really well too. But we had never done that exact thing, and our client knew it, but they needed help. And one thing we've gotten good at is learning new tools quickly, and learning new languages quickly. So again, I think it's one of the things he said at the beginning of the boot camp 3 weeks ago, that one of the best skills you can gain is how to learn new languages in pretty short order, because that's what you've just done. And then we piled React on top of learning JavaScript. So you can get good at that. That's great. And you can like just build another little to-do list kind of thing in a different language. Build Note Herder in Java or in Swift. Make a mobile app version of Note Herder or whatever, if you have nothing better to do and you have a free afternoon and there's a new technology you're looking for an excuse to learn. One technique we use sometimes is we promise people we'll teach them something that we don't yet know. And that scares us into learning it really well, really quickly. Or at least I've heard of people who have done that thing. We're a couple minutes before the break. I have two more stories that are kind of related to this real quick, and then we'll take a break, and then we'll talk more. One, kind of a really bad way to do a job interview. My brother-in-law at a job interview was asked once why he was leaving his old job. And he said he couldn't get along with the people. And the interviewer said, well, we have people here too. So, don't give the impression that you can't get along with people. Because, if you think one person's a jerk, maybe they're a jerk. If you think everyone's a jerk but you're probably the jerk. And getting along with people is super important. So, anyway, don't be a jerk in life in general. Certainly in a job interview, don't act like a jerk, and don't tell stories that make you look like a jerk. And over time, live a life that leads to fewer stories where you look like a jerk, even existing. The other one I'll tell you that I promised I would tell long ago, I won't say, I won't provide too much context. But one time, someone was coming almost to recruit to a group of students that we had. and talking about what it was like to work there. And one of the students asked something like, what kind of hours do you work? And, or what's work-life balance like there? And one person told the story like, I'm a parent and I have to pick up my kids at school every day. But, I just make sure I take my laptop with me to pick up my kid. And like maybe I work in the car while I'm waiting for them to come out. And, this is kind of creating this horrible picture of what it's like. But the reason she told that story was because the other person she was with from that company had said this about the work-life balance. And it was basically saying, oh, you have to be super dedicated. And like sometimes people are like, yeah, I have to go pick up my kids. And did this complete with the crying hand motion. Yeah, I have to go pick up my kids. Like, holy crap, man. I want to work there if that's what it's like. So then the other person interrupted, like, no. Like I have to pick up my kids sometimes. I just make sure I bring my laptop with me and literally work while I'm picking up my child. Like, okay, that doesn't really help. but at least you didn't mock people who have children and lives. Yeah, that's how not to be a person who is recruiting for a job. Okay, let's go ahead and take our break. Yeah, and how not to be a boss.